I'm joined by the 2024 winner of Announcer of the Year last night's World MMA Awards, the one and only Jon Anik.
Thank you, Brad. It's good to be with you guys. How are we doing? You guys are keeping the lights on for us.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Well, we're waiting on Anthony Smith, as you are, to announce it. But this is a big card, UFC 310. How do you prepare for a guy like Kai Asakura making his UFC debut in a championship fight when you're looking at your commentary duties?
Well, certainly the fighter meeting is the foremost thing for us, just getting to sit down with him. And I think any of us who have crossed his wake this week understand how much self-belief resides within this man. But I will say, in the 10-year history of the Anik and Florian podcast, this is the first time at a championship fight where Ken Flo has a preconceived notion as to who he's going to pick in the fight. And then he watched the film on Kai, and he has pivoted off of Pantoja. He believes Kai is going to win the fight. And when I think about Pantoja and his relentlessness and his ability to push through that wall and having never been finished, he's now fighting a guy, at least in terms of my study, who has the long-range weaponry to actually put him away. So I came in sort of wondering, like, why is this guy getting a championship opportunity in his UFC debut? And now I am acutely aware as to why.
Is Florian joining you next? I mean, Bitcoin's over $100,000. Does he need to bother joining you next week, or is he good?
You know,
he's riding off into the sunset at this point, let me tell you.
Insisted that I buy this Bitcoin stuff and it would dip, and he'd be like, hey, man, you know, I'm not trying to get in the way of your finances, but maybe you should dive back in. So thank you, Ken Flo.
Yeah. Talking about the Asakura fight, what do you think about him making flyweight now? Do you think that's going to affect his, because he's been winning these last few fights all at bantamweight, and he hasn't been in flyweight in a while. You think it could make a difference? In my opinion, we might see a big difference tomorrow than what we've seen in his last couple of performances.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bigger issue could just be the quality of the opponent. But I think for Kai, even though he's bullish on his ability to compete at 125 pounds, you don't really know until you know. But I think if the scale is any indicator, I think you'd all agree he looked pretty good today, you know. But yeah, I mean, I think long term is the bigger question for me. When we would talk about Khamzat Chimaev making 170 pounds, and there were times he actually did that with relative ease, but can he make that weight and consistently defend the championship at that weight? So I think that is a bigger question for Kai Asakura. But
because I think also, like, Robert Whittaker used to fight at 170 and he did better at 185, right? So, like, you know, that's my question mark on this fight, because like you said, Pantoja can break through that wall in terms of taking damage and going through into deep waters in the fight. And I have a feeling that maybe making flyweight might be hard for him, for Kai. So
yeah,
pass through that wall himself.
Yeah, no, I absolutely think that that's fair. And I also think divisionally, when you look at flyweight, it's certainly, and you can speak to this, a little bit of an easier ascension, right, at 125 pounds. When you think about all the depth at 35, I mean, when would this type of opportunity materialize for Kai Asakura? How many wings do you need to string together? And probably would be an underdog in a lot of those fights. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean, 1 for 1, obviously, in the UFC making the number. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Last time someone tried to do this was TJ Dillashaw. He really didn't look good against Henry Cejudo when he cut down from 35 to 25 to try to fight him.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And TJ Dillashaw obviously believes that was the gravest mistake of his career. But Kai has definitely injected sort of life into this pay-per-view week. I've liked sort of the willingness and the desire that he has to connect with the American fans and to speak English. And we'll see what happens. You know, Pantoja, though, to me, I just have to say, like Nate Landwehr said something in our fighter meeting about downshifting in a fight, right? The willingness of some fighter, like me on the treadmill this morning, for example, right? The going gets tough. I downshift, right? I am not pushing through that wall, right? And Nate Landwehr's a guy, I think, in those situations in fights when maybe it's a question of cardiovascular abandonment, he's able to not downshift and stay in that moment. And that's the thing about Pantoja, is that he ain't gonna downshift, you know? So you kind of have to separate him from consciousness. I don't know that playing the long game with this guy is going to be any sort of picnic. So it's a fascinating championship fight.
Yeah, of course. I want to ask you just on a different fight, the Randy Brown situation. What do you think? Have you heard anything? Is the fight going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Do you feel like, is it a tactic by Brian Battle, or do you think that he just couldn't make the weight?
So I did just speak to Randy Brown backstage, and he was sort of bemoaning the fact that he wasn't informed of some things earlier. I don't have any sort of information for you, but based upon what I saw backstage and the doctor observing Brian Battle, I'm not sure he's going to fight. He weighed in 175 pounds, as I'm sure you guys documented here. I think Randy's hopeful that somehow, some way, the fight will stay. But yeah, I mean, even half an hour, 45 minutes after weighing in, he was walking gingerly back there. So I think we might be down to 13 fights. We'll see.
All right, I guess we'll have to see how that plays out. And I know Anthony Smith, we're waiting on him to make weight. Last one for you, co-main event, Shavkat Rakhmonov, Ian Machado, Garry. I know you're good friends with Bilal Muhammad, the champion, and he's going to have to fight one of these guys that will still be undefeated after tomorrow night. And I know that Ian mentioned at the press conference yesterday, this is the best combined record of two undefeated fighters to face one another in UFC history. I think, it's a bummer that Bilal fell off this fight, but I mean, Ian Machado Garry is no longer the future. He is the present, because it's a present for all of us to get to watch two undefeated fighters like this get to face each other at this stage of their career.
It really is a dream matchup, and both of these guys are the real article. They're great human beings. They're great fighters. They do all the right things, right? And in terms of Ian Machado Garry, and he's a plus 300 underdog this weekend, and I think that number is more bloated than it needs to be. But even if this fan base hasn't responded to him in kind, and maybe if they're in some part put off by his disposition, just know that this man is so married to the game and leaving no stone unturned in terms of the preparation. So for me, always fighter first. What are you trying to respect the athlete for? Because he leads the league in work ethic, right? So for me, it's like, that's what I focus on when it comes to Ian Machado Garry. And I think if he fights Shavkat Rakhmonov 10 times, I think it's a competitive series. So we'll see what happens, Strength of schedule, definitely a lean to Ian Machado Garry for me. I think you look at the Michael Venom Page fight, right? And a lot of people think, oh, yeah, Shavkat's just going to walk through MVP. Okay, we'll do it, because MVP doesn't seem like the easiest guy to fight. So yeah, I'm excited.
I find it weird that he is plus 300 because he is a tactician also. And I know like some people make fun of him because, oh yeah, he beats guys, but he doesn't always get bloodied up. But it's not really martial arts anyway, right? The whole point is to hit the guy without getting hit. The best boxers in the world. This is what I find it weird about MMA fans compared to boxing fans. Yeah. It's like the greatest boxers, they're all incredibly good at defense. Right, Muhammad Ali is great defensive fighter. Right. Mayweather, great defensive fighter. So many of the greats are so skilled at not taking damage, but dishing out damage over time. And you see it happen. Well, boxing, they have 12 rounds. So do you see, or like you said, downshifting before. I thought you brought up a great point with the downshifting. You see it more often in boxing because they have so many rounds, but they're a shorter time, but many rounds. You'll see a guy give up a couple of the first few rounds.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Even what's the teammate? Mayweather's teammate, the short guy. He knocks everyone out.
Gervonta Davis.
So many times he's losing the first 3-4 rounds and knocks. Yeah, Floyd too, right? So I just feel like eventually Sorry, I stepped on you.
No, you're good.
Eventually over time, MMA fans are gonna realize what some of these fighters are doing when they're being a little bit more tactical to beat some of these better guys who might have better physical attributes. Like in my opinion, I think MVP is much faster and more physically gifted than an Ian, but Ian outplayed him that night.
Right. Ian Machado Garry was knocked down by Song Kanan. It was sort of the most adversarial moment of his UFC career to date. And I look at the way he responded to that adversity, and I think that's a feather in Ian's cap going forward. Not unlike the Pantoja-Asakura fight, I think the issue might just be the opponent, right? And Shavkat Rakhmonov's versatility as a finisher, I think, is really the key for me. And Bilal Muhammad is one of my best friends in the world. Kamaru Usman is a guy who is near and dear to my heart. But neither one of those guys in their careers, at least to this point in time, has developed like a signature choke, right? Despite all of the ground control, despite all of the time that, in theory, they do spend on the canvas. And I know they are different stylists on the ground, right? But position over submission, or however you want to describe it, Shavkat Rakhmonov, he is so subtle and nuanced in his ability to find a finish that I think Ian needs to be really careful. But Ian Machado Garry, to your point, is an absolute tactician. And, he's getting better, not worse, with every passing training camp. So.
First time Ian Machado Garry will be an underdog in his professional career. Feel free to use that tomorrow night. As we always love watching you on the broadcast as UFC 310.
He was also nominated last
pay-per-view of the year.
He's just dropping gems.
Well, right. I mean, you guys are asking me about Randy Brown and Brian Battle. I'm about to say, what does AB have for you on that? Because I got nothing.
Well, I mean, the fight might not be happening, so don't worry about it.
Well, hey, I mean, I've already prepped those guys, so, the haze in the bar.
That's the worst part, eh? When you do all this preparation and then the fights just don't come together. And there are times where you lose 2-3 fights, and I'm sure that probably murders you a little bit inside, and you just have to move forward.
It does feel like Brian Battle, though, and I hate to speculate, but I will, that he must have been dealing with some sort of circumstance, because he really is a professional, and, he just looked pretty defeated and deflated backstage. So I'm hoping that everything's okay with him, because that was a pronounced miss, and I think surprising to a lot of us
It's
here.
weird, because Randy, when we interviewed Randy here before, he said that they should have told me earlier. So I was wondering if maybe they knew the day before, a couple of days. Because it was weird, because when we did the last UFC live weigh-in show, there was an issue with Brian Ortega's weight. Remember there was a whole
yeah.
controversy,
Yeah,
but
they changed the weight
he
class.
wasn't feeling good the whole time, and then they changed the weight class, and there's all these last minute changes, and then Danige jumps in 4 hours before, like a whole thing. But it's interesting. So I'm wondering if they knew about it a couple days ago or not.
Yeah. Well, I'd imagine so, and it's interesting when I look at the fight card, right? Because I think about this from a live production standpoint, and I was just backstage with our producer Lappy LaPlante as they were discussing Randy Brown and Brian Battle and the implications for us, right? Changes up all of our television formats, but this is the first fight on this middle batch of prelims, so might actually be kind of clean and might get Chris Weidman potentially onto ESPN2 here in the United States.
I think you
of
mean
America.
Sportsnet Plus.
Sportsnet.
And
Sportsnet
Sportsnet
Plus,
360.
yes, sorry, of course.
Yes, thank you for that.
So,
I wanted
John.
to ask you,
Love
John,
my
before
friends.
you.
Yeah, they're going to kick me out
What
of
do
here.
you think of
now,
all
I
my
guess.
memes, man?
I was going to say, look at these guys. I mean,
This
this is amazing.
I'm
I
trying to
mean,
promote the
this
show
is-
over
this
here,
is
you
a
know,
big
guerrilla
deal,
marketing,
you
right?
know?
Yeah.
You guys have tremendous traction. These are unbelievable.
Yeah, look at this one. I think this one really
Look,
captured
it is.
my Clay Guida.
It's amazing.
Where's your brother? Is your brother here?
He is here, yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah,
met
let's,
him
let's
earlier.
bring Jason in for a second.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to know, he's filming. He's not here.
Oh, he's
at the
not here.
weigh-in
Okay.
show. He's actually filming content for a Canadian company, Oddshark, right now. Live.
Wow, good for him. All right.
Yeah.
All right, well,
New
thank you.
podcast now, too, I
thanks,
see.
Thank you for joining us. I know
Having us,
Anthony
man.
Smith might be
Always a
coming up
pleasure.
any second now. We've kept you for too long. We
We
appreciate
shall
your time.
see. Anytime.
All
Thank
right.
you, boys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's